Good evening, good morning, good night, whatever the case may be. It's time for World History. And I am your host with the most, Coach Hughes. I used to coach softball a long time ago. That's how I got the name, Coach Hughes. So, we have been in a pretty in-depth discussion, lectures about the Roman Empire. And we started chapter 11 off by really talking about Julius Caesar and how Caesar came to power under the first triumvirate. Very popular among the plebeians, the poor, not so much with the patricians, the wealthy, the elite, the rich, if you were. And they carried out, the Senate did, along with one of Caesar's arguably his best friends, Marcus Brutus, a plot to assassinate Julius Caesar on March 15th, 44 BC. Carried out that plan. That set up the second triumvirate with Caesar's grandnephew, Octavian, who would later be renamed by the Senate as Augustus, or that meaning revered one, with Lepidus and Mark Antony. Had like a memory loss there for just a second. And it really came down to Octavian and Mark Antony. And Mark Antony had previously married Octavian's sister, but he went to Egypt and he fell in love with Cleopatra VII there, divorced Octavian's sister, and married Cleopatra, not pleasing Octavian at all. And then it was kind of the showdown. Octavian eventually defeats Mark Antony and Cleopatra's forces at the Battle of Actium. And Mark Antony and Cleopatra go back to Egypt. They commit suicide because they know if Octavian gets a hold of him, he's going to torture him and then kill him. And then it was all Octavian. Of course, Octavian, as I alluded to earlier, the Senate gives him the new name Augustus, meaning revered one. And really, you got 200-year period of peace, the Pax Romana, all the culture that is Rome starts to emerge during this time period, really a golden age. And then you had some up and downs, of course, after the passing of Augustus. So Rome does well for a while, but then cracks in the foundation start to emerge and problems within the Roman Empire start to emerge. So that's where we're going to kind of pick up to today. We're going to kind of talk about these cracks that develop in the Roman Empire, the problems, if you were, and then kind of what leads to the ultimate downfall of the Roman Empire. So let's talk about the problems in the empire. Well, after Marcus Aurelius' death, one of the good emperors, I should inform you, Commodus and the Servans, kind of like a cabinet or advisors to the emperor there, they ruled Rome. Now, if you look at the picture here, if you've ever seen the movie Gladiator, Joaquin Phoenix played Commodus in the movie Gladiator, and that movie kind of makes Commodus into a pretty bad individual. Probably in real life, in real history, Commodus was not that evil. No records of him plotting to kill his father, Marcus Aurelius, and he was pretty competent ruler. I don't think he was a great ruler by any realms, but I don't think he was a bad or evil emperor as the movie made him as well. Now, after Commodus, after the Servans, after their rule ended, Rome's leadership, it grew weak. The government grew really corrupt. And these are some reasons that you see kind of this downward trend, if you would, about the way that Rome declined. So you had a series of weak rulers and really who's in charge, because there were a lot of assassinations of Roman emperors in a short period of time. Over 50 to 100 years, you had a kind of a revolving door of emperors. And just think about it. Anytime you get a new leader, they have an agenda. They have, here's what I'm going to do. Here's what we're going to do in Rome. And really, before they got it started, you had these assassinations of these emperors, and then the next person would come. Well, they would have maybe a different agenda as their predecessor, and it was just a rocky road. And then the corruption kind of shows itself as well. If you have emperors being constantly assassinated, you can see the corruption in the government, that kind of grab for power. I want the power. No, I want the power. No, listen to me. I want the power. So you have this weakness in leadership. You had a revolving door of rulers because of really assassinations on emperors. And then you had that whole corruption, that grab for power. Add on top of that, with a weakened government, no real clear direction, the economy kind of starts to fizzle out and it bottoms out. Because remember, Augustus, he started a great plan. He made tax collectors permanent workers. This made an influx of money constantly into the empire. But if you don't have that leadership, if you don't have that guidance, then the economy starts to fizzle or tanks even. So you have just this growing amount of things that start to really take a toll on Rome. Now, another problem was Rome had at one point a fearless army, a military. Everybody and anyone was kind of scared of the Roman military. But Rome started to have to defend itself constantly from attacks from the north and east. And it's kind of like you just picking at somebody. Hey, I'm picking at you. Hey, oh, I'm picking at you. Oh, I'm picking at you. Constantly. And that was kind of done on purpose. They were kind of probing them to see, is there a weakness? And eventually what they're going to do, they're going to poke, and then, I hit a soft spot. And then everybody else that kind of feared Rome, they're going to sit back and, you can't attack Rome. You can't attack Rome. Wait, did they just attack Rome and win? Now, come on. Now let me gather my military, let me gather my army, and we're going to poke at Rome now. So you had a lot of people that did not like Rome, kind of sitting back. Yeah, you can't defeat the army. You can't defeat the army. And then as they're watching other people go at it, and then they have some success, now they start to think, maybe the time is right now. So you had that problem. And then problems came from within the empire too. Disease, plague, that all of this started breaking out. And then when you have these diseases and plagues that break out, the population starts to dwindle. Maybe the people that could have prevented this decline of the Roman Empire, maybe they're not there because they died of a sickness or plague. So all of these things, the assassinations attempts, the weak rulers, disease, constant attacks, the economy tanking, lack of leadership, like I said, all of these things, it starts putting a toll on Rome. Now, taxes, they were high because the economy was tanking. We got to bring in more money. We're not making as much money as we were when the economy was rolling. We got to bring in more money. And so you had more and more money coming in because of taxes. So taxes were high, food was scarce, and many farmers, they went to war. Now, go back to this Pax Romana when I mentioned Octavius when he started as emperor. They were giving food away. They were giving food away. Free food. Government giving you food. But when the government doesn't have money, if the government doesn't have true leadership, they're not giving that food away. Food becomes scarce. Farmers start fighting each other, maybe for land, maybe for food. So here's what Rome did. Germanic farmers were invited. Hey, come on in. We need work. We need to produce more food. We have a great climate, California type climate here. Y'all come in, but there's only one problem. You're bringing people into the empire that have no knowledge of the empire, really. They don't have the Roman culture. They have no Roman loyalty. So what some of them start to do is to start packing up this food that they can grow, that they know how to grow, but they're shipping it back. They're exporting it back to Germany, Germanic tribes, really without the Romans' knowledge there. So the scarce food supply, it stays scarce, to say the least. Now, there are some people that say, oh, whoa, we got to do something. We have to do something. One of those people were Emperor Diocletian. Now, Diocletian comes to power, and he tries to establish reforms. Got to change things. Hey, we change it. We got to change things, because if we don't change things, we're headed down a slippery slope here. So I've got to improve the political situation. We're going to try to do things. And he starts to really think outside the box. And that's what you had to do at this time period. You had all of these problems. Rome was sinking faster than the Titanic did. What do? We got to think outside the box. How do we save the empire? Well, there's this old story about two mothers, one being the adopted mother, one being a biological mother, but the biological mother really didn't care anything about the kid itself. Gave it away, but hey, I want it back because you're giving it all these things. I need money. So long time ago, this story was. So who gets the child? Biological mother who really didn't care anything about the child, or the adopted mother who really loves and wants the best for this child? And this is an old time story, not 2021 story. Okay. So what they did is they took it to the leader of their village, and biological mother, I want control. No, the adopted mother, I want control. The leader says, I got a real simple solution. We're going to cut the child in half. What? You're going to cut the child in half? Well, yeah, we're going to cut the child in half, and you can have a half, and the biological mother can have a half. And really, truly, the adopted mother said, no, we can't do that. That would kill the child. The biological mother can have the child. The adopted mother loved the child so much that she knew in order to have this child survive, it had to go with the biological mother. Well, ended up, the biological mother didn't want anything really to do with that child. And so she kind of got out of the picture. And really, the leader knew that this was going to happen. So he gave full control over to the adopted mother, because she was willing to give up that in order to save that child. The reason I tell you that story is because Diocletian is thinking outside the box, and he comes up with this radical idea. The empire, the Roman Empire, is so large, surrounding all of the Mediterranean Sea, that the only way to save the empire is to, well, cut it in half, split it up. It's too large. So Diocletian splits the empire into two separate empires. You have, appropriately named, the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. So Diocletian's thinking outside the box. His only solution to save the empire, not the republic, but the empire, is to cut it in half. If we cut it in half, if we have two emperors, if we have two governments, there's a chance we can save this spiraling out of control government that is the Roman Empire. So that's what they did. Diocletian split the empire in two halves, the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire. Now, after Diocletian, Emperor Constantine, tried to stop the empire's decline. He moved the capital city to Byzantine, and the city later became known as Constantinople. So really, he had to move it away from Rome to Constantine in order to save it. So you've got two different governments. You have the Eastern Empire, the capital being Constantinople, and you have the Western Roman Empire, and the capital being the city of Rome. Now, one of those tribes that were kind of sitting back, watching what was going on, is Rome vulnerable, was the Visigoths. Now, the Visigoths, they feared another group called the Huns. You may have heard of their leader, Attila the Hun. And the Visigoths, they come into Rome and they asked Rome for protection. And you got to remember, Rome is kind of at a focal point. Rome is being split into parts, Western and Eastern, and now you have a group that is asking for protection, and really Rome was in no position to offer protection to the Visigoths. But because they were in a declining state, they made a deal with them. And they said, hey, I'll tell you what, we'll offer you protection, Visigoths, but we're going to require you to be loyal to us. You're going to fight for us, because their military was declining. They needed more help to protect and patrol their own empire. So they made an agreement. We, Rome, will protect you, Visigoths, from the Huns. And you, the Visigoths, are going to be loyal to us, and you're going to help us patrol our area, and you're going to fight along with our military soldiers. Well, that agreement, like many, doesn't last long. The Visigoths rebelled against the Romans. They said no. Eventually they said no. We're not going to fight with you. We're going to fight against you. And at the Battle of Adrianople, the Visigoths beat the Romans. And that was kind of the poke that opened everybody's eyes. Hey, the Visigoths just beat the Roman army. Hey, the Visigoths just beat the Romans. And by word of mouth, what had happened? All of these other tribes said, this is it. This is our time to take back some of this territory. This is the time to attack Rome. They are at their weakest. We're talking about the Western Roman Empire. More Germanic groups, they invade Roman territory. The Roman military can't control them. There's too many of them coming up at once. The Visigoths leader Alaric and his soldiers, they go into the city of Rome, the Colosseum, the temples, and they burn the majority of Rome to the ground. Another group, the Vandals, they overpowered Rome's territories in Spain and northern Africa. The same territories that Rome had won in the Punic Wars are now gone. They're controlled by a group called the Vandals. They too marched on Rome and destroyed even more buildings. The city of Rome really left in ruins. And the final straw, Odoacer, a Germanic leader, he took control of Rome's government from then Emperor Romulus Augustulus. And this event, when Odoacer took charge, took control from the Roman Empire marked the end of the Roman, or I should say, the end of the Western Roman Empire. Italy, Spain, the Alps, Germania, Britannica, the Gauls, Northern Africa, all gone. The Western Roman Empire fell. It had been glorious for years, but it was no more. And when Odoacer took control of the government from Romulus Augustus, that, my friends, ended the Western Roman Empire. Now, a band of Visigoths ended up killing Odoacer, and they set up a kingdom, not an empire, but a kingdom in not Rome anymore, but what would eventually become the country of Italy. But we still had the Eastern Roman Empire. And as a matter of fact, it continued to prosper for many years after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. But they had a name change. Rome had always been associated with the city of Rome and Italy. And really, the Eastern Roman Empire didn't want that name of Rome anymore because it didn't really want to be associated with Rome because, well, Rome had been defeated. Let's put it that way. So it had a name change. The Eastern Roman Empire officially became known as the Byzantine Empire. Now, the Byzantine Empire included areas like Greece with the Greeks, Egypt for the Egyptians, the Armenians, the Persians, the Arabs, the Jews, the Slavs, and the Turks. Everybody to the east of what currently is Italy. Constantinople was the official capital of the Byzantine Empire. Constantinople was located between the Black Sea and the Aegean Sea, and this is crucial as to why the Eastern Roman Empire survived, because it was in the smack dab middle, basically, of the continent of Europe and the continent of Asia. It was the crossroads, the beginnings, really, of the Silk Road that leads into Asia. Trade. Everybody that was going to Europe from Asia and from Europe to Asia had to come through Constantinople. And they spent money there. They traded there. They built up what would become a great city in Constantinople. Now, the people of early Constantinople, initially, they followed Rome. They followed the Roman ways. They were once the Eastern Roman Empire. That's the only thing they knew. So they did the only thing they knew. They spoke Latin and enforced Roman laws. But they were off to the east, and Rome eventually falls. And remember, a lot of the things that Rome had established had already been done by the Greeks there in Greece. So eventually the Byzantine Empire became more influenced again by the Greek culture and the people of Greek. People started to speak Greek, and they drew more upon this Greek culture. They kind of come full circle, because we started out with the Greeks, and now we're back to the Greeks. And remember, we went through a period in the world called the Hellenistic era, where everybody really in the world at that point was involved in Greek culture and spoke the Greek language. Justinian was the emperor of the Byzantine Empire from 527 until 565. His wife, Empress Theodora, Justinian's wife, as I stated, helped her husband rule Byzantine. And she gave him advice on how to advocate for more rights of the Byzantine women. Really unheard of, because if you think about it, Egypt, women had a lot of rights. In the Greek city-state of Sparta, they had a lot of women rights. But in Athens, the city-state of Athens in Greek, not so much. In Rome, they were influential somewhat, but they didn't have power, or they didn't have a lot of I'm lost my train of thought here. The women did not have a lot of value, I guess you could say, in the Roman. They were influential, but they couldn't own property and things like that. Now, the Byzantine Empire lasted a pretty long time, 1,000 years. Constantinople was its largest and wealthiest city, not to mention its capital. The Byzantine Empire depended on trade. It was in the middle of a trade route. It was the center of the trade route, as a matter of fact, between Europe and Asia. And the Silk Road was very important to this. Silk weaving was a major industry. Byzantine emperors supported arts and architects, but silk was a major industry, hence the name of what would become known as the Silk Road. All right, let's talk about the civilization and the culture for just a minute, the Byzantine civilization. Hagia Sophia was the religious center of the Byzantine Empire and was a great architectural accomplishment. You can see a rendering or a drawing of that off to your left, my right here on the screen. Mosaics are pictures made from many bits of colored glass or stone. Most mosaics showed saints or Christian or many other holy people. As you remember, we mentioned before, Christianity, which we'll talk more about in the next chapter, really started during the time of the Roman Empire. Marriage and family were extremely important in the Byzantine way of life as well. Now, Byzantine women, because of Empress Theodora, obtained some rights, more so than in what had been the Roman Empire. They became educated, and some even served as regents, or people who stand in for rulers who were too ill or too young to rule at the time that they were kind of put in or thrust into power there. The Byzantine government, they supported education. You needed to be educated, they thought. Boys studied academic subjects in Byzantine schools. Girls did not attend school, but they were taught at home by tutors or by their parents. All right, possible essay questions as we move forward. Describe at least 3 factors providing in detail for the fall of the Roman Empire. So let's review that real quick before we go. You had all of these assassination attempts on rulers, a kind of a revolving door on the leadership. The rulers that were in power, most of them were poorly educated or not well suited to be leaders. Because of that, you had a decline in the economy there. You had plagues and diseases that broke out all over the place. Those are some of the factors that contributed there to the falling of the Roman Empire, including, as we talked in detail today, constant attacks from invaders on the outskirts of the empire, eventually until you kind of walk in, gain Rome's trust, what the Visigoths did, and then they kind of rebelled and won. That was the kind of the eye-opening statement today, in which all the others kind of sat back and watched. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our lecture on the decline of the Roman Empire. I hope you learned something. Until I see you again, this is Coach Hughes signing off. God bless and roll tide.